Chapter 6, Lesson 5 is writing equations from tables. The equation is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope. It's also the change in y over the change in x. It is the rise over run. It's the per, the each. It's the movement when creating a line. B is the Y-intercept. It's where x equals 0, giving you the coordinate 0 and Y-intercept. It's the beginning, a registration fee, a startup fee, the great thing about writing linear equations from tables is we talked about the change in y over the change in x being the constant rate of change in Chapter 2. So we are continuing this process. So this is going to be the same. The only part we will have to review is finding the y-intercept, because not all tables will give you the coordinates where x is 0. You might have to do a little bit of adding and subtracting to find it. Let's take a look at example number 1. Remember that the slope is also the change in y over the change in x, which we also remember is the constant rate of change. So for the change in x is adding 3. The change in y is adding 6. So our slope is the change in y over the change in x, 6 over 3, simplified by 3, and our slope is 3 over 1. The y-intercept, remember, is where x equals 0. So if you look in your table, where does x equal 0? Therefore, the y-intercept is 0, 1, where b equals 1. We can now write our equation, y equals 3x plus 1. Do we have any questions at this time? Let's look at example number 2. If you notice in number 2, there is not an x value of 0, so this is one where we are going to have to find it. First, let's find the slope. of the change in y over change in x. It looks like x is going up by 3. And y are going up by 15. It is. They are going up by 15. So right now we have our slope is the change in y over change in x is 15 over 3. These can both be simplified by 3, and you get 5 over 1. But the y-intercept, if you notice, there is not any zeros. But I do know that 0 is just in between -1 and 2. So since these are going up, or there's 3 in between, I'm going to make another table down here for x and y. I'm going to start with my -1 and -6. And I notice that my slope is going up by 5. Remember, the change in x is 1 and the change in y is 5. So I'm going to add 1 and add 5. So if I add 1, I get 0. If I add 5, I get -1. You can use your slope to determine the y-intercept. So now we know the y-intercept is 0, -1, therefore B is -1. My equation is y equals 5x minus 1. We will do a couple of more examples like these together. Let's take a look at example number 3, because it too does not have a 0 for x. But the first thing I want to do is find my slope, which is the change in y over the change in x. Y is changing by 1. X looks like it is going down by 5. Therefore, my slope, change in y over change in x, is -5 over 1. And my y-intercept I am going to have to find. And again, I'm going to go down here, make a small table of x and y. And it looks like for this one, I'm going to have to work backwards. I'm going to put 1 and 8. And I have to think, what plus 1 equals 1, and I know that it's 0. And then I want to think, what minus 5 equals 8? Well, I can work that backwards. So 8 plus 5 is 13. I know that 0 plus 1 is 1, and 13 minus 5 is 8. I am still using my slope to determine it. Remember, the change in x and the change in y. I can use it to go backwards or forwards to find my y-intercept. It's where x equals 0. We get 0 and 13. B equals 13. So y equals -5x plus 13. Are there any questions at this time? So remember, the first thing you want to do is find your slope, your change in y over your change in x. Find your y-intercept. It's the value of y where x equals 0. If x equals 0 is not provided for you in the table, you will need to use your slope to determine the value of y where x equals 0. Does anybody have any questions at this time? Let's see if one of you can do number 4. Let's get a couple of you to work number 5 and 7. How about number 6 and number 8?